Good afternoon. My name is Susan Doyle and I will be your facilitator today on behalf of Lean Construction Ireland. I would like to welcome you to Lean Construction Ireland's 32nd webinar, the topic of which is Choosing by Advantages by Paz Arroyo from DPR Construction. If you have a question, please type it in the question box and we will consolidate and ask Paz in the second half of the webinar. If there are any questions that we don't get answered during the webinar, we will follow up by email afterwards. The speaker for today is Paz Arroyo from DPR Construction. Paz is a quality leader at DPR Construction. She holds a PhD in Civil and Environmental Engineering from University of California, Berkeley. She has extensive experience in the construction industry internationally with a strong background in lean management, especially around decision-making in design. Her experience is diverse, from working in mining tunnels for Paz Arroyo in Chile to working as a sustainability consultant at Gensler San Francisco. She has previously worked as a lean consultant for several owners, general contractors, and architects for healthcare, pharmaceutical, commercial, semiconductor, and heavy civil construction projects in the US, Canada, UK, and Chile. Paz is also an adjunct professor in the School of Engineering at Catholic University of Chile, where she previously worked as a full-time professor teaching sustainability, lean, planning, and innovation in construction. She has published over 30 papers in peer-reviewed construction management journals and conferences. Paz is also co-founder of Collab Decisions, a platform to share knowledge on how to make collaborative decisions. As a quality leader at DPR Construction, she brings an extensive background to implement a behavioural approach to quality using her experience in lean and collaborative decision-making to activate change in the organisation. I will now pass you over to Paz to start her presentation.
Thank you so much, Susan. That's a great introduction. Welcome, everyone. I hope you're all safe. And I'm happy you guys could make it today. I know that we're living in challenging times, so thanks for being here, and please feel free to ask questions, as Susan said. So welcome to the introduction to Choosing by Advantages. Again, my name is Paz. This is the agenda for today. I'm going to give you an introduction, and we're going to talk about why CBA, Choosing by Advantages, is useful for construction industries. I'm going to walk you through the basics of Choosing by Advantages, give you some toy example, and then some real case studies, and then we're going to move on to questions. So why Choosing by Advantages? Why we want to use it? So in the construction industry, I mean, this is just a better way of making group decisions that stick. We need more collaborative, more transparent, and also a way to understand how value for money, how much value we get for the money we have for a construction project. So we usually make decisions with conflicting interest, and we know that's hard. And most people do not know how to use Choosing by Advantages or any other method that will help bring people together. So we're going to talk about that today. And also, what I see very often in construction projects is that people get stuck and waste time waiting for someone else to make decisions instead of being proactive and leading that decision-making process. So just a little bit about my journey. Susan said something about what I have done. So it's been, for me, learning how to use Choosing by Advantages. It's been a 10 years journey. You don't have to spend 10 years, but just what my journey is. So the first thing I did is read this book, Choosing by Advantages, by the Decision-Making System by Jim Shure. So he was the person that developed this system. He's an engineer from the US Forest Service, and he wanted to bring a collaborative approach to make decisions. He had to deal with multiple stakeholders. So then I started to thinking, okay, how this gets applied to construction industry, making some toy examples. Then at Gensler, I had the opportunity to actually test it in practice with architects and understanding how this actually can be implemented. Then I graduated from my PhD, then was able to do more research on it. So did some experimental studies to compare choosing by advantages with other methods that are more traditionally used while I was a professor in Chile. Then developed education and training systems for construction companies. So and lead very, very hard decisions like this one here. This picture is a very important decision for a city for the water treatment system they were going to use, and that took a very long time, several months of preparation to understanding the facts and the different implications of the alternatives they were considering. But in a week altogether in a room, we were able to actually get to a resolution that everyone understood. Then more experience teaching it internationally and working with owners, and also traveling a lot around the world. That's India for IGLC and Ireland. Actually, that's last year when the IGLC was made in your country, guys. And also I'm implementing it in at DPR Construction, right? So I'm going to talk a little bit more about this one. This is how we use it to choose an ERP system. And finally, I also wanted to mention we have, we just published a book, Lean Construction Core Concepts and Frontiers. The editors are Professor Torsopoulos, Mike Giangiuliou, and Lori Koskela. The chapter on decision making and choosing by advantages, I was part of it. So in construction, again, many times teams are waiting for decisions. Decisions are made too soon or too late without too soon without the information we need, or too late when the project gets delayed. Too many specialists, no one looking at the project as a whole. So we need somebody that brings everyone together. Usually there's no clear methods, or whoever has louder voice will make the decision or more power, but it's not necessarily who knows more or who understands all the implications of any decision. So, and the other thing is that when you make decisions like that, other people do not know why your project look the way it looks. Why are you using these materials? Why do you have this design? So most people understand that decisions cause actions, and those actions have outcomes. But what we don't see often is that those decisions were caused by the method we use to make those decisions. And yes, the method you choose to make your decisions will influence your decisions. So if the outcome matters, then the decision-making method will also matter. This is what Jim Scher brings to the table, and it's a very important revelation to me and to many in the lean construction industry. We were not paying that much attention of how we were making those decisions. So how do we know we're making a good decision? What do we need to make a good lean decision? Well, we need to make sure we are providing transparency so we can create a clear and shared rationale for the decision. We need to be able to compare and contrast the value versus the cost of the alternatives. In construction, we tend to just choose wherever is cheaper, and that's not going to give us the best value for the client. It doesn't assure that we're giving the best value for the client. And there's no relationship between value and cost. Sometimes with the client value, it's also the cheapest alternative. And sometimes it's not the cheapest. Sometimes it's the more expensive. So there's no correlation between value and cost. And we need to be able to understand what value is for the client for a particular context. Then we need to be able to build consensus. So optimize the whole, not the pieces, right? That's a lean concept. Avoid unnecessary conflicts and iterations, right? We don't want to talk in general about things. We want to be very specific and context oriented. Also, we want to allow for continuous improvement. We need to document decisions, help future iterations, and when we add information, when more people is added to your team, they need to know why you are where you're at, so we can save time, resources, and also result in an overall better decision. So all of those things, really, choosing by advantages help with it. So as I told you, this is Jim Shure. He developed this system, the choosing by advantages decision-making system, and he said that there are 4 different stages. The first one is the stage setting phase, so understanding why are you making this decision, who are the stakeholders involved, what are they concerned with, and then you move to the innovation phase. So you start thinking, okay, how do I solve this decision problem? What are the potential alternatives? What are the things that will actually help differentiate the alternatives? Then I do make the decision, which is what's going to make the focus of this presentation. And then the number 4 is reconsideration. So did I actually consider all the alternatives that I had to consider? Did I consider all the factors that were relevant for this alternative? Did I consider all the stakeholders? What else was there that I didn't see? So think about that as the overall stages for complex decisions. So this is an endorsement from Greg Howell, and Greg Howell was one of the founders of the Lean Construction Institute in the US, along with Glenn Ballard. And he really challenges people and says, this is the best, CBA is the most powerful and effective approach to making decisions available. And if you find anything else that's better, just let me know, I challenge you. And I would like to keep the same challenge for you. If you have any other system that you think it's better, please let me know. So choosing by advantages, it's a system, according to Shure, and it has definitions, principles, models, and methods. This is a decision-making process, not a tool, and the process produces improvements in the way that we make decisions. And it also needs a new set of skills. So when you have to develop a skill, that means you need to practice, you need to study, and you need to practice until you get to being skilled enough to use it. So these are the principles of the decision-making, of choosing by advantages. So first of all, the basis is our decisions matter. So I think we all believe that our decisions make a difference in the world, in our families, in our workplace, everywhere. So if our decisions matter, our decision-making methods also matter. And the way that we use the vocabulary also matters. Our decision-making vocabulary matters. So that's the basis. I think I don't have to convince you on any of that. It's common sense in my mind. But then we have 4 other principles that are not that obvious. The pivotal principle, the anchoring principle, methods, and the fundamental rule, which I'm gonna explain here. So the pivotal principle, it's really that decisions must learn and skillfully use sound methods of decision making. So this is really saying, hey, you need to learn and practice this. The fundamental rule is decisions must be based on the importance of advantages. If there's one thing that you're going to get out of this presentation, is this one. I want you to remember these principles. This one principle especially, decisions must be based on the importance of advantages. So write that down and think about that. I'm going to give you examples later on. Then the anchoring principle is decisions must be anchored to relevant facts. So, and relevant facts are going to be differences between the alternatives, which are advantages. And then the method principle sets that different decisions call for these different sound decision-making methods. Okay, let's go for the vocabulary so you can understand what Jim Sher meant by clear vocabulary and how this actually helps make clear decisions. So we need to have a clear understanding of all these words, what it's an alternative, a factor, a criterion, an attribute, and an advantage. So an alternative is what are you choosing from? It can be two or more people, it can be a thing, it can be plans, from which one is to be chosen. Then you have factors. Factors are general ideas. So think of a factor like a container that has different elements. So if you're choosing between cars, one factor can be the fuel economy. Fuel economy, it's really a general idea until you put something called criterion. So it's the standard you're going to reach to make a judgment. So fuel economy can be measured in kilometers per liter or miles per gallon that the car it's going to give you, right? So that's a criterion, and the criterion could be the more kilometers per liter you get, the better. So it has to be a rule that's understandable for everyone. And it can be either a must have or a want to have. So must have means if an alternative doesn't comply with this criterion, then I'm not going to consider it anymore. So that really simplifies your decision. Then you have attributes. Attributes are actually the characteristics, quantities or qualities of one alternative. So if you're exploring a car again and you want to know how much is the kilometers per liter that it's going to give you, you have to understand what's that number, like 30 kilometers per liter. I don't know, wherever it is. That's the attributes. That's how the car works. It's part of the car characteristics. It's not an opinion, it's a fact, mostly a fact based on understanding how this alternative work. And then you have advantages. Advantages are the beneficial difference between the alternatives of the attributes of two alternatives. And always one of those alternatives, it's gonna have the least preferred attribute. So we're always comparing against the worst alternative when we describe advantages. That's very important so everyone is on the same page. And when you talk about advantages, you know you're always comparing against the worst alternative you are considering. So that brings more discipline also to the decision making. So here's an example. You probably know these guys, Yao Ming and Michael Jordan. So Michael Jordan attribute in terms of height is 6 feet and 5 inches. And Yao Ming, it's 7 feet and 6 inches. So they have a difference in 1 feet and 1 inch. What is the advantage? Well, the advantage is going to be depending on what the criterion is. If we're talking about basketball, probably the criterion is going to be the taller, the better. So if we agree on that's the criterion, then we're going to say that Yao Ming has an advantage of 1 feet, 1 inch. And we're not going to talk about disadvantages. We're not going to say Michael Jordan has a disadvantage of 1 feet, 1 inch, because we're just double counting the same fact. So when you choose by pros and cons, advantages and disadvantages, what you're doing, it's double counting the same difference. So we just want to count the difference once, and we're gonna take the advantage perspective. You could also choose by disadvantages, but it will be just depressing. So let's look at the advantages for everything. Always a disadvantage can be translated into an advantage, but we just want to make sure that the difference is going to be counted just once. So do not choose by advantages and disadvantages, or you're going to be double counting. It's important to it's not about what factor is more important. It's about what factor will help you differentiate between the attributes of the alternatives. So high, it can be an important factor in basketball, or it cannot be an important factor, depending on what's the advantage and what are other differentiators. So it's really context-based. It's speed. The difference is speed, really more important. It really depends on the context again. And then decision making is subjective. Yes, it is subjective. If there's a human being making a decision, there's going to be a subjective part for sure. But what we're doing with choosing by advantages is really trying to do the objective part first, which is understanding what are the advantages of the alternatives, and then we want to do the subjective part, which is how do I value those advantages? And this rule really helps make life easier. Okay, so let's go for, these are a step-by-step representation of the tabular method for choosing by advantages. It's not the only choosing by advantages just method, but it is the one that I really like to start with because it gives you step-by-step how to do this. You can, when you practice these and you're more skilled, you can actually skip some of those steps and go faster, but I don't recommend that until you really have mastered this one. So we're going to follow these steps, these 7 steps. First, we're going to identify alternatives, then define factors that we think will help differentiate the alternatives. We're going to define a must criteria or a want criteria for each one of those factors. We're going to summarize the attributes of each alternative. So those are the facts about the characteristics of those alternatives. Then we're going to describe the advantages, decide which alternative has the advantages. Again, we're always comparing against the worst. Then we decide the importance of these advantages. We're going to develop a scale to do that. And then the last step is evaluate cost versus importance of advantages. Okay, so let's go for an example. This is a very simple decision. Let's imagine this is a decision I made a couple of years ago. I lost my phone. I'm already an iPhone fan, so I just had to choose between iPhone 7 or iPhone 7 Plus. I know we're in number 10 now, but it's just a good example. So how do I differentiate these 2 alternatives? What factors are relevant? I thought, obviously, there were things that are relevant, like the difference in size. And for my perspective, smaller is better, which is not true for everyone. It really depends on who you are. I had a colleague of mine that is short-sighted, so he preferred the bigger screen because he could read easily. In my case, I have smaller hands, so I really prefer to be able to hold it comfortable in my hands, so smaller was better for me. There is a difference in weight, and in my mind, weight is better, less is better, so that's the criterion. The resolution of the screen has some difference, more is better. Then there was a camera difference. There was the bigger one had optical zoom and the smaller one did not have it. So having optical zoom is better. That's the criteria. And then the battery life, more hours of battery life is better. There were other factors that I thought about there may be relevant, but there was no differentiator between the alternatives. For example, you can get any capacity, you can get them in 24 gigabytes or wherever capacity you want for the iPhones. I mean, it doesn't, you don't have to choose that based on the model. You can get each one with as many memory as you want. So that's not a decision differentiator. I'm not going to consider that in my decision. I just want to focus on what differentiate the alternatives. So that's what I'm going to base my decision on. So then the fourth step is describe the attributes of each alternative. So then I did the homework and I write down what are the attributes of each one of these iPhones. And then if you can see, there's attributes that are underlined. Those are the least preferred attributes. So if less weight is better, I'm going to highlight the highest weight. Sorry, underline the highest weight. So that's going to be my mental cue to describe the advantages. If I had more alternatives, I will always compare against the worst one, the one that's underlined. So then the next step is decide the advantages of each alternative. So then I just spell out, write down what are the advantages. So iPhone 7, it's 0.8 inches smaller, 5 grams less. Those are the advantages that has. On the other hand, I have the iPhone 7 Plus that have 75 ppi more, 2x optical zoom versus none, and it has 7 hours more for battery time, talking time with agency. So the next question is, okay, now I understand the advantages, I've done my homework, I understand how they are different, how the alternatives differentiate. So how important are those advantages? So that's what you have to think next, and that's the subjective part, but we're going to create a scale of importance to have a conversation, to lead a conversation, facilitate a conversation where everybody can follow. So we're gonna, first step is going to decide which one is the paramount advantage. So for me, the most important advantage was having 7 more hours of talking time with 3G. That was the difference between getting at the end of the day with the phone, and I had to travel. So sometimes I mean, if the battery is not working for the whole day, it was a very serious inconvenience. If something happened home, I couldn't know, or I couldn't tell how I was doing, and I knew that was very important. Then then I give an importance score of 100 importance of advantages to that advantage. Then the next step is starting comparing all the other advantages against the 100 points. So the 2x optical zoom versus none, it is important, but not as important as having the battery working. So I gave 80 points of importance of advantages because it's actually the camera I'm going to be using, and also when I'm at home with my kids, I want to have an optical zoom that gives me a little bit more freedom to take good pictures. And since I haven't, I mean, the phone is what you have around with you, that makes a big difference. And then the 0.1 inch smaller wasn't as important as the other 2 advantages, so I give it 70 importance of advantages. And then the grams, 50 grams less, it's really not that important, not going to be able to perceive that. And the 75 ppi more, it's even less important. I don't think I'm going to be able to really tell for the kind of things that I do with the phone that kind of a difference. So it's not a relevant difference. Not that resolution is not important, but the difference in resolution, it's very small. So it's not going to be important in this decision. So this is when you do it collaboratively. You do the same thing for group decisions. What I recommend you guys do is to put the advantages on Post-it notes, and you draw a scale from 100 to 0, and then you start discussing which one is the paramount advantage, and then how the other advantages compare to that. So you have a discussion in the group, make sure everybody can speak, don't let anyone dominate the conversation, and get back to the facts, get back to what are the differences between the alternatives, get back to the advantages. Do not allow the conversation to go on this factor is really important. It's not about the factor that's important, it's about the difference between the alternatives and the advantage. So again, decisions must be based on the importance of advantages. So when we do this, we then can actually have a scale of importance of advantages, and then this helps us make a decision. So the advantages of iPhone 7, it's 100 importance of advantages, and the advantages of iPhone 7 Plus was 200. Okay, so now I understand what do I value out of these two alternatives, and I haven't talked about cost. So this is the last step. Well, it happens that the iPhone 7 Plus, it's $100 more expensive than the iPhone 7. So what you want to do, and this is the same with a construction related decision, is you want to draw the importance of advantages versus the cost. So you need to ask yourself, what I can do for $100? Can I get anything else that give you more importance of advantages with other decisions that I'm doing for this building or for this construction project or for my life in this case? So in this case, I decided to actually spend more money. I spent those $100 more because I really couldn't think of anything else that it will be worthwhile spending that money on. The phone is something you actually use all day long. So I definitely wanted to pay for getting the advantages, getting the value that I thought I really value more. I value more the battery lifetime and having the zoom, camera zoom. So you know what you're getting for your money. You know, I made a very conscious decision, and even though I didn't like the size of it, I thought it was more, the other advantages were more important. Okay, so that's the toy example. I hope that's clear. If you have questions so far, please let me know, write them down. Do we have any questions before I move on to the other examples?
Hi, Paz. No, we have no questions at the minute, but they usually kind of come in at the end of it, so you can continue on.
All right, good. So money differences, again, money decisions are interdependent decisions, right? We have a fixed budget for our lives, for our projects, so that makes all decisions interrelated. And money is not a scale of valid importance. It's not about value. Money doesn't tell you what you value. So do not assign importance scores to money. And we do this mistake over and over in construction projects. We try to, when we wait, the way that we buy out subcontractors or construction companies, what we do is we assign a percentage of importance to cost without regard to how much value are we getting. So again, the fundamental rule for money decisions is that decisions must be based on the, what did you wrote? Importance of advantages, not importance of dollars. So please remember that, and this comes from Jim Shore, and this is really, I think, very, very important and revolutionary for the construction industry. So just for you to know, there are different choosing by advantages methods. And it can be, you can use choosing by advantages without following this table that I just showed you. The tabular method, it's really for complex decisions. If you only have two alternatives, you can use the two-list method. And then if you have a simple decision, you can make a simplified two-list method, the instant CBA or recognition response. So I'm not going to go in detail into those ones, but just for you. I mean, I do have a lot of people that said, oh, Paz, I don't have time to spend on using choosing by advantages for every decision I do. Well, when you practice enough, this is just a way you think, and it really makes your life simpler for any decision you make. And sometimes you don't even have to write it down. You just know what the advantages are and how you value those advantages. Okay, so let's go for a case study. This is for selecting a structural system. This is a project in California. It's a dorm. It's a green dorm from Stanford. So this is a study the project team was making. They were trying to decide whether to make the system, the building structure made out of wood or steel. And the project team considered 10 factors and cost. So this is what the steps that we're going to follow to think through this exercise, right? So we do have the alternatives. We need to, the team define the factors, then define the criteria, and then the advantages. So when you do this, the decision turned out so simple because actually for all the things that this project team was looking for this particular context, the alternative two had steel frame had pretty much all the advantages except for the CO2 emissions. And even though the CO2 emissions were important, it's almost it's 80 importance of advantages. It wasn't as important as the paramount advantage, which was having more interesting and more flexibility for research. This is a university, and they really want to test different systems throughout the life of this building. So having a steel frame will allow to do all the research program. So that was the most important. And you can see the difference in importance of advantages is 350 versus 80. So this helped the team really get quickly to a decision, and it's pretty obvious. So it really makes project teams' decision easier, simpler. And then the decision around cost, well, wood was actually first cost of just if you just think of the cost of the materials was cheaper. But if you think in the life cycle cost, and because this is an owner, this is a university that actually will operate the building, it's not going to be sell to others, and they have to pay for the long-term cost. And thinking of all the experiments and changes they wanted to do, actually steel was cheaper in the long run, also considering potential damage for earthquakes in the future. California, it's an earthquake active zone. So the decision was made for the long term and with the best alternative. So they went for steel. This is another case study. So this is a project team that actually, again, in California, where they started implementing Lean, but the project team got stuck with the decisions, and they called some consultants. My friend David Long and I helped this team. So when we got to the project team, they really were not all in the same page. There was not a consistent way of evaluating alternatives. They did made a lot of work. They had a lot of information and different alternatives. But again, there was poor documentation, lack of accountability, ambiguous scoring methodology, and then people wasn't buying in on the decisions because they couldn't follow, they couldn't understand why. So decisions were revisited over and over. So what we did was really introduce them to choosing by advantages and start creating a system in which everyone was participating and understanding what were the advantages of each alternative. So we did 24 different decisions with the team for different things, HVAC systems, and where to place some elements of the design and so forth. And the team started to get faster and faster at understanding how to use choosing by advantages. And they also started to come out with more ideas. So they actually saved $10 million for the design budget throughout all these 24 decisions. And sometimes the other thing that I want to show you here is that sometimes it was not always choosing the cheapest alternative. Sometimes the team went for alternatives that were more expensive than the baseline, but provide better value. So for each decision, there was a conversation about what's value for the client and what's cost. And then the team made a decision in which they actually provide more value for less cost. So the client was very satisfied. There was a of course, documented facts and decisions. The decisions stick with the owner and the project stakeholders. There was less rework in design and with the decisions. And the team started to develop a trust and respect together. You know, they were able to listen to each other. Every person had a different understanding of the alternatives. Mechanical engineers will understand different things that what the architects or the general contractor or the subcontractor will do. So having a platform where everybody can explain what are the advantages from their perspective is very important. So they started to work together across contractual lines and get these are measurable benefits that they got. The meeting speed increased by 37%. For each decision, they were faster and faster. They saved, again, almost $10 million. And it's just a worthwhile time spent. This is another case study. This is in DPR Construction. This was a tough decision. It was choosing an ERP system for projects in Europe, and there were 6 vendors that were considered. And in the RFP, in the proposal, the team put together 300+ criteria. So there was so many data to evaluate this softwares that everyone was just overwhelmed. So again, we help with choosing by advantages and just thinking through, okay, from all these criteria, which ones really do differentiate the alternatives? So then we've moved from 300 to something like 30 that actually were a differentiator for these alternatives. And then you could set a room, hear from each other's perspective, understand these differences and what the impact of these advantages are going to have for the team that's going to be working with this ERP system. And then again, differentiate value and cost at the very end. And then you get to the same result. You get to a team that actually understands and buy in why we're going with this particular software. So again, this is choosing by advantages is really for creating a buy-in and collaboration for the team. Okay, so I'm at the end of my presentation.
Thanks, Paz. That was a great presentation, very insightful. I have a couple of questions already in. On the university case study you mentioned during your presentation, what challenges were experienced in adopting CBA on the project?
Yeah, so it's always the same challenges. It's really convincing people that it's worthwhile learning a decision-making method like choosing by advantages so you can move faster. So it's always the same thing, like, can you, people don't want to stop to learn. They think they are busy and that they will, it's going to be a waste of time, or people is not going to understand, you know? So
Okay.
that's I think the biggest challenge.
Okay, perfect. Another question. The university project would have been made up of a number of teams, managers, etc. Can you give an example of how choosing by advantages was communicated with these teams and managers?
Yeah, I can give. So it really depends of where the project is and where the requests come from. So
Okay.
in the campus project, for example, the team was already stuck. I mean, they were wasting time, so they needed help. They reached out to consultants, so they were eager to listen and to get help. Some other cases, it's the client. When the client actually asks for help, it's fast. It goes faster because everybody wants to just follow through. When it's the general contractor, it also works, but it depends of who in the team is bringing this in, and how do you present this to the rest of the team so they understand the value of it.
Okay. I have another question here from one of the attendees. They didn't understand the part of giving the points of importance to each factor. Could you explain it again?
Yeah, so you don't give points of importance to factors, you give points of importance to advantages. So again, if there's an advantage in the case of the Zoom, I have a difference between the two cell phones. One has optical zoom, the other doesn't. So that's an advantage. I'm going to think about the importance of that advantage, not the importance of the factor. So it is a practice. It's as I said, it's more subjective. So what you have to think through is first which of those advantages is the more important, and you give 100 points to it. This is an imaginary scale. It's not mathematics. It's not a calculation. It's really more a conversational art. So you have to agree with the team, make sure you give space for everyone to talk and to give the reasons why they think this is the most important advantage, and then get back. I mean, make sure people is not saying, for example, in one case, I had one architect saying, oh, environmental impact, it's CO2 emissions is the most important thing for this decision. We were choosing a ceiling tile material, and she said, just CO2 emissions is the most important factor because of climate change and the crisis in the world and etc. But when you ask her, well, is this difference in CO2 emissions between these alternatives relevant? Think about this difference, and that difference was very minimal between the alternatives. So then that factor is not important. That advantage is not important for this decision. We're not trying to get general knowledge that's applicable to everything. It's really context-based. So again, look back at the advantages and then think through whether or not that advantage is relevant.
Okay, that's great. Another question here. Have you ever worked on a project where the team doesn't make a decision and the project gets delayed?
Oh yeah, that's where we come into place. Yes, that's yes.
Can you give us an example? Would you have one to hand?
Yes. Yes. So once so this was a hospital project, and they were trying to choose an HVAC system, and they couldn't agree on which one to use. I mean, on one hand, the doctors were really concerned with air quality. The project team was concerned with money. The owner was concerned with money too, because they were already over budget. The mechanical engineer really didn't care. He wanted to give just the technical advice, but he didn't want to be part of this discussion around cost because he felt it wasn't his issue. So really what you have to do is put everyone on the same page and say, okay, let's talk about the alternatives we have. Let's go through the advantages of each one and then bring everybody together and again, make sure we can get what's best for the money we have. So yeah, the team was delayed. I mean, I think in that case, I think they were talking about this for 3 months. They have said to the owner, if you don't make this decision by now, the project design is going to get delayed, etc., etc. That time the decision was not made at that time and so forth. So yeah, that's like the typical story.
Okay, that's perfect. They are all the questions we have in. Do you have anything else you'd like to add before we finish up?
No, I mean, I think this is really, it takes some practice, give it a thought, and probably it's not what we normally do. I myself had to learn and spend time and really forget this idea of weighting factors. I think that's the most used method in the construction industry, and that really doesn't help you get to the best decision. So think about that. And there's some material and resources that I can give you guys here.
Okay.
This is the website for collaborative decisions, and there's also a bunch of choosing by advantages paper in the international group for lean construction. So if you want to look for more examples or things like that, I think that's a good place to go.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you. Okay, I'd like to thank Paz again for presentation. A copy of this webinar will be sent out to everyone who attended. We'll send out information shortly via LinkedIn, Twitter, and newsletter for April's webinar that is taking place on the 29th of April, the topic of which is cultural challenges of implementation of LPD. That will be presented by Alan Mossman from the Change Business. Thank you again from Paz and myself on behalf of Lean Construction Ireland. You can follow Lean Construction Ireland on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and through the website leanconstructionireland.ie. Enjoy the rest of your day and please stay safe. Thank you, Paz.
Thank you, guys. Have a great day.